Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Sainato with Real Progressives, and tonight, as my guest, we have a fellow Real Progressive, Jon Lancelot, with us. Jon, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
My pleasure. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, everyone's talking about it right now on Twitter. It's been trending this afternoon. Hillary Clinton had a candid interview on Recode, a coding conference out in California. And one of the things that she said that struck me, my girlfriend pointed it out, but it kind of lit a light bulb. She said she blamed a new excuse. She blamed the DNC. She said the DNC was bankrupt, that she had to give it money. The data was either wrong or non-existent. And to me, it almost made it seem deliberate, like she was speaking directly against the DNC lawsuit without saying it, like trying to dispel the DNC. Oh, the DNC couldn't do anything. I had to help the DNC. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't have rigged the primaries. So, what are your thoughts on that comment?
I think that politics is a sport, and whenever you have establishment figures coming out saying that they're a part of the resistance, trying to throw shade on a case that is very important, not only to progressives, but also to the rest of the country, to the American people, trying to distort the actual efforts of those who are trying to come out and bring out the truth. It was basically an attempt to basically put themselves in the middle of a political revolution that they were working against in 2016. And I've seen it over and over again in my political career where progressives have been consistently stepped on by establishment Democrats. 2010, 2008, 2004, you name it, we could talk about it. It just seems that they're continuing their strategy of downgrading progressive thinkers and progressive movement in general. And when they come out to these shows and they start saying, well, it's all these other reasons why we're in the current predicament that we're in, that they're desperate, and progressives should be very confident that that we have the upper hand, even though the mainstream media has basically tried to block us out. But great reporters like yourself are bringing out the truth, and the people are really starting to understand that whenever they see an establishment figure politician come out and start to say things, that they're starting to really second guess it. So when I heard of this, I was just like, well, this is just a continuation of what we've been dealing with for the longest time.
And that brings me to what I think is good news in our movement is this past weekend, two Maine state representatives, two representatives in the state house in Maine, actually unregistered from the Democratic Party. They're already in office. They're already serving. They left the Democratic Party. They said, "Screw the Democratic Party. We're independent now." They didn't explicitly say why they did that, but recently in Maine, there's been a lot of discussion on controversy over the mining regulations in the state. These progressives and a lot of environmental activists out there want an outright ban on mining in Maine just because of the inherent and unavoidable environmental consequences associated with it, and how there's no way to protect groundwater from being contaminated from mining, and they wanted an outright ban. The Democratic Party said, no, we're just going to do a few little more regulations here, and that's it. And they left. So, what are your thoughts on that, and how do we continue this movement where progressives finally say, enough is enough. I'm going independent. I'm not dealing with this Democratic Party that continues to subvert progressive policies, don't fight. They side with the industry over the people.
Well, you know what? It's been a long time coming, brother. It's been a long time coming, let me tell you, because I've been a progressive and an independent for a very long time. And I have worked with the Democrats before. I have a lot of friends who are still Democrats. I have a lot of respect for my friends who are still in that organization. But this is the thing: Dementor is not going to work. It's not. That party has basically lost its way, and has become the GOP. If anything, it has become more right wing than we ever imagined it would be. And the fact that they're willing to, compromise on the environment is very troubling. It's very troubling, and the fact that these two lawmakers decide to step out of the Democratic Party, it doesn't surprise me at all. Because let me tell you, if you're progressive and you're running for office as a Democrat, thinking that you're going to change it from the inside, I have a question for them. What sort of policies are you going to have? If you're running for federal office and you win the office, what sort of foreign policy you're going to endorse? Are you going to have the room in that party to suggest a new direction for the country? What is your economic plan going to be? If you're running with the party and you want to change it from the inside, how are you going to deal with the bylaws? I think these two politicians basically started writing on the wall that no matter how hard they pushed, that they were going to be signing on to more neoliberal policies. It goes straight up, to the federal level, down to the local level. They're supporting something that they, in their hearts, they don't want for the American people, because the reason why we're involved in this, because we want to do right by our people, the American people, and also we want to do right by the world. So as progressives, we have to really do a lot of soul searching. We have a lot of great efforts out there. We have the Progressive Independence Party. We have the Draft Bernie, the People's Party. Right now, I'm just calling it the People's Party because you know what? We need something like that. We need to organize ourselves without the Democratic Party because it's the only way we're going to grow. When people say that the Democratic Party is inevitable and we have to work within it because it's all we got, it's all we have. Well, do you see any Federalists running around? Do you see any Whig Party members running around? I don't. So we have to do the hard work to make sure that we stick together, and we have the media that's there, the independent media that's been helping along with our efforts to make sure that, whenever politicians, they see the light and they're like, I cannot hang with this party anymore, that they have a place to go. Because right now we have a lot of progressive independent candidates that are out there, by themselves without support. I know when I was running for governor, I found a lot of, opportunities for us to grow as progressives, because right now when you run as independent, you don't really have much, but you can if we all stick together and we have a plan. And I feel like Nick Branya has a good idea, and I think Erica Blas also has a great idea, and those two organizations and with all the other organizations, including RP, if we all are able to come together to the table and say this is what we need to do, we have a Cornel West, we have a lot of backing, then we will have substantial way of moving forward. So yeah, kudos to those two politicians that in Maryland that bravely stepped out.
I'm not sure if you saw in Politico, they published what really was a hit piece. I think it was Sunday or Monday. It was one of those hit pieces where they throw in a couple of quotes to make it seem as though it's objective, but the narrative was Bernie Sanders' political revolution was hitting a roadblock, and they portrayed this narrative that the revolution couldn't get people in office. And a lot of the examples they cited were Keith Ellison and Kimberly Ellis out of California, when those elections aren't decided based on voters, that are decided by DC or DNC insiders, Democratic Party insiders, who obviously, like you said, the Demexit thing really isn't going to work because they have the rules involved with those that infrastructure, so that progressives don't win. The people don't win. That the party leadership can really coordinate, who gets placed where, what elections, which are really elections and democratic whatsoever. They're not transparent. They assert the control over them, and they haven't made any sort of semblance of reforms in trying to change the rules so that the people have more say in the Democratic Party. So, what are your thoughts on that narrative, and some of the losses that the political revolution within the Democratic Party has suffered? We've had James Thompson, who narrowly lost a congressional race out in Kansas several weeks ago, and then most recently the Rob Quist. He came up short. Even though he outperformed expectations and didn't really have help from the party establishment. How do you see this narrative, and what do you think progressives can do? Especially the ones who are trying to get good people elected as Democrats instead of more corporate and establishment Democrats that are just going to make the party even worse.
That's a good question, and I really respect the efforts of the fellow progressives who are trying to do this strategy of trying to get good progressives elected in the Democratic Party and all that. But we have the evidence, we have the empirical evidence that it's not working. How many times are we going to? I mean, we can keep hitting the same thing until we get it. That's fine. We don't even have one. All right, maybe Bernie Sanders, but he's an independent. And he still has to let us know how he won as an independent in Vermont to become senator. I'm very interested in that. But what I'm trying to say is that we don't have a choice. We have to have another plan at least. We can't just say, you know what, drop what you're doing, drop all the construction and drop all the building you're trying to do. Let's just go enter and try to work from the inside. That's an incomplete strategy. That's not a viable strategy. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. So when I tell all my colleagues who are trying to do that, I'm like, great, go ahead, do that. I know a load of progressives that are trying to build something new, like a new party. I don't like saying third party because that makes it sound really small, like the Green Party. I'm talking about a coalition, including the Green Party, because the Green Party itself also has issues that's very rigid because parties are very rigid. So we want to make sure we're making something new that's going to be powerful. We have to make sure that we have the policies to back it up, because we're dealing not just with our local elections, our state elections, and our federal elections. We're dealing with a world that needs to be repaired. We have to repair relationships with countries abroad. We don't know how much damage there's going to be out there at the end of Trump's administration. So we have to be, very wide thinking on what we're going to do if we get the power to make the changes. And going with the Democrats, we're going to walk in. I mean, if you remember 2008, Obama said we're going to have a new deal. We're going to have a new deal 2.0. But the thing is, his ideas of getting it about was very flawed, first of all, and he lost to Congress because of many different reasons. That's another debate. But he was the progressive of the time. He was the progressive candidate. When he walked into the presidency, I mean, he was basically clobbered over the head with neoliberal policies abroad and Wall Street economic plans. And, he didn't have any progressive policies to back him up. So right now we have to do a lot of coalition building for our elections. We have to make sure that we get on the ballot. That's the first thing. Second thing, we have to make sure that we have a very solid economics plan, and we have a bunch of great economists like Stephanie Kelton and Joe Firestone that could help us along the way, with that. And then we have to have a very, good foreign policy that we could present to the American people and say, look, we don't like war. That's great. We want peace. And the way that we, try to work towards peace is that we don't do regime changes anymore. We don't try to topple governments and leave a void, which leads to more proxy wars and things we can't control that we're forced to deal with. So these are the issues that we have to deal with as progressives. And we have multi-layers, but we have a lot of great minds involved. And I believe that the Democratic Party, to help us along with that, is not going to work. We really have to be innovative. We really have to think outside the box. And what I'm seeing is a lot of that.
And can you tell us a little bit about, what's going on with the New Jersey Democratic primary for governor, and, your thoughts on, replacing Chris Christie?
Absolutely. So basically, the gubernatorial race is an open seat. We have the Democrats and Republicans running for that seat. We also have the Green Party running for it. I know the Green Party is probably not going to win, not because the candidate can't, is not a good candidate. Is just the way the system here is structured. Also, the Democrats are, there's a lot of Democrats running. We have Phil Murphy. We have John Wisniewski, who's the progressive candidate. I would say, and there's other ones like Brennan. He's also a progressive candidate. I considered. And there's also Mark Zena, who's not as known, but I've met him and he's a great guy. I've met a lot of these guys except for Murphy. I would say the progressive candidates have a lot going against them right now because we have closed primaries here in New Jersey. The good thing in New Jersey is that if you show up to the polls as independent, you could basically switch to the party during whichever primary you want to vote for. If you're independent, you show up and want to vote for Democrats the day of, you can do that. But a lot of people don't think to do that because they just basically think, well, I'm independent. I can't vote in the primary. That's your first initial thought. And, you're going to, not go. You might not know about that rule. The Republicans are basically lost in the woods because, Chris Christie is our party leader. Kim Guadagno is the front runner. You don't really hear a lot about her. And the voices out there in New Jersey is that, it's a blue state. So it's a foregone conclusion that a Democrat's going to win. The problem that the Democrats have is that they're endorsing a Wall Street candidate. And to be fair, he hasn't been in Wall Street in a while, but he did work for Goldman Sachs, Phil Murphy. And, and it makes the Democrats look like an establishment party, which I cannot really gauge. It's very difficult to gauge in New Jersey what they want. But the thing is that if the Democrats want to have a progressive candidate, they're going to have to get behind John Wisniewski. But the thing is that I don't think that they've reached enough independence to pull that off. I hope they do. But there's a lot of issues with New Jersey politics, and people in New Jersey really know that. I have all the hope in the world that if we could change things on a congressional level, that we'll be able to change the states. But for me, I think that the voters need to be informed by the people who are running, and I think there's a lot of distortion. Also, I think there's another candidate named Jim Johnson who's also running as a Democrat, and he's also in the running. But I really can't predict what's going to happen in that because there's so many different factors going on. I just know that closed primaries are the enemy of progressive candidates, seeing what happened to Bernie during the last year. So I'm very interested to see what happens because, New Jersey is an ongoing saga.
And one of the problems with New Jersey, and I'd like you to talk to our viewers a little bit more about this. And a lot of states have this problem: is that there's this one big Democratic Party machine run by I believe George Norcross is the billionaire's name. Here in Florida, Stephen Battelle is a billionaire donor who just took over as Florida Democratic Party chair. By really manipulating the rules and using his alliance with Debbie Wasserman Schultz to get elected to that position. So you really have a billionaire running things. So in New Jersey in particular, how do you recommend, what avenues do you see progressives coming up with solutions to take power away from someone like that?
We really need to understand the process here in New Jersey. When I started learning how the process worked, I started realizing that there's a lot of legal mechanisms that prevent grassroots from taking hold. There's a lot of progressive New Jersey, voters and volunteers trying to help progressive Democrats get to the forefront. Even when I was running, had a lot of progressives working with me. For me, I realized that I would need more of an infrastructure, which was missing because I was running as an independent, and there's a lot of other things going on. And plus, I had an opportunity to help the rest of the country, which I'm doing right now with my policy writing and also, doing the shows in RP. But what is going on? Yes, we have a lot of graft here. We have a lot of power structures that are beyond the control of the people. Well, George Norcross in South Jersey has been involved in politics for a very long time. I think that he also helped Christie get into office. So yes, he does have a lot of power. The system allows that to happen. Human beings are going to exploit things for power. We all know that. How do we get around it? How do we get around the system? How do we change it? That is a question mark here in New Jersey. We really have to see how this gubernatorial race turns out. I think the legislature needs to address it more. I also believe that the lack of the ability for the people to formulate their own state referendum, which referendums come from within the legislature, that's also an issue. And so there's a lot of systematic things that should be discussed. And so that's why I said New Jersey is an ongoing saga, because I know a lot of independent candidates who are running. I know Democrats who are running. I know Democrats locally. They're working very hard to get things done, and I respect that. But, when you go from state to state to state, you start realizing that states have individual problems different than the other. And we have a very particular issue here in New Jersey that's been here since the beginning of the state that we're dealing with, and we're trying to make change. But I do believe that when you have a Congress that works for the people and you have the right congressional leaders, I believe our congressional leaders in this state are lacking. We need new congressional leaders to look at the whole country and go, you know what? We need to have a Green New Deal. We need to have a New Deal that's going to be for the people. A lot of our states are not doing well monetarily because they don't have control over the monetary system. That's the same issue that we're having here in New Jersey. We have a tax problem, which property taxes keep moving up and up and up, and the citizens don't know what to do. But all roads lead to Congress, and that's why we have to put more pressure on our congressional leaders to work for the people and not just for their special interest.
In these times, especially when everything in the environment and the climate's so politically polarized, what advice do you have for activists to hone in on something where they can focus their efforts on, or specifically get involved with, because obviously now it's overwhelming. Everything you see is negative about Trump and all these different organizations, good and bad. AstroTurf and actual progressive ones are trying to clamor to grab hold of this anger that a lot of people are feeling. So what advice do you have for people who don't really know what to do with that?
You're absolutely right. I think we need to have a dialogue or a message more than, we need to get Trump out. We need to get Trump out. And whatever Russia, that whole thing's going on. We need to go beyond that. And what activists can do is learn how to be a campaign manager, learn how to be a treasurer, learn how to fill in the gaps for these candidates, progressive candidates that are trying to run for your local office, state office, or even a federal office. If your campaign is independent, try to learn how to do those positions so we can help these candidates. Because what tends to happen is that when you have candidates out there and they're really trying to get out there, they don't have the proper pieces to follow through or win. And so activists should really learn how to run campaigns. That's the next step. The first step is protesting, which we're very good at. We're very good at organizing protests. We're very good at going into cities and making and towns and making our voices heard. We have that down to perfection. But now we need to go to the next level. It's winning elections, getting on the ground, knocking on doors, going online, meeting people, telling people what you want to do. That's the next step. If you have progressives out there, progressives who are sick of it and want to run for office, help them. Do more than online activism. Go learn how to, count the money. A lot of states have different rules for that. I know here in New Jersey, there's a test that you have to take to become a treasurer, so you could help your candidate. Learn how to run a committee for your candidate. Learn all those functionary parts so you surround your candidate so they're protected, and so you could win an election. You could because we have the internet. The thing is, Mike, is that we have the internet, and right now we have the FCC trying to break up net neutrality, which is another issue that progressives have to deal with, which is like our communication, not just for our movement, but for the country, for the information that we receive. We want to make sure we're receiving good information, but we still have the internet now. And so hopefully we'll have it next year when we're running congressional elections. But there's a huge disconnect between the power of the internet and the power of our on-ground strategy. We need a way of getting our candidates elected. And the way that we do that, if the Democratic Party is too gross for you to run with, You definitely don't want to run with the Republicans. You have to make sure that your candidate has all the pieces, or they're not going to succeed. And so we need to have some sort of organization or some sort of thing within our movement where we teach people how to become a strategist, political strategist, so they could win in our local elections. Because just saying run local, that's the one thing that's hard, because it's hard, and it's also hard on that candidate's family. It's hard on their friends because it really tires you out, because you have to really be all over the place speaking to people. Make sure that you have a support structure. I feel that we should be able to provide that for next year. And that's why I'm bringing it up now. We're going into summer, so we keep talking about these issues, about filling these gaps. Then the internet will be able to go and then spread our word out, market ourselves, and win. And that's just that's just logic.
And are there any candidates beginning their campaigns now that you think people should pay attention to that might not be on people's radars just yet?
I've had a lot of them on my show. I can't really name them right now, but if you go back and watch my RP show, I've interviewed a lot of them. There's also a few here in New Jersey. I'm not sure if they're still running. I could say this. If you're running as an independent, I support you 110%. If you're running as a Democrat, I would say be careful, because you run as a Democrat and you're a progressive, you got to make sure that you're getting that support, and the support that you're getting it's real. They're really giving you the tools that you need to help the people. And I think that candidates, and this is my advice to candidates really have to make sure they're connecting with the community. It doesn't matter if you're running as a Democrat. It doesn't matter if you're running as a Republican. I don't care if you're conservative. I don't care if you're liberal. I don't care if you're progressive. I don't care if you're libertarian. If you're not connecting with the people, you're not doing your job. You shouldn't be running. You should try to go into something else. Also, people who are in office, if you're in office and you're not connecting with the people, you're having town halls and you're trying to make justifications for why you're voting against the people's health care, voting against our peace across the country and across the world, voting against things that human beings need, you should not be in office. You don't have a need to be there. Also, people who dream on being in Congress and who actually been in Congress for the past 10 years, why are you still there if you're not working for the American people? Obviously, you're there to gain power for yourself. And so, yes, my advice to candidates who are running now is to run as a public servant is a very important thing that you could do in your life and for the lives of others. Don't go there and then say well, I'm going to do all these things to get my own power. Really, do it because you want to help the people. And that's my advice.
And specifically independent candidates, what advice would you give to them, and what specifically should they be doing to not only to become viable and to ultimately win, but to really address the stigma often associated in our country's politics, where independents are kind of ignored or viewed as an underdog who doesn't stand a chance.
Right. Well, when I say block it out, block it all out, and carpe diem, seize the day. Right. In order to make change, people are not going to take you seriously at first. They're going to think that you're you're not running with the establishment party. You're just going to be. I think it happens to the Green Party a lot. They have not overcome that. I know a lot of good Greens that are running for campaigns and losing, not because they're not great people and great candidates, but maybe the party that they're in, they haven't come up with a collective strategy as a unit, as a organization to overcome that. They're just going to run and lose. Independents have an advantage. There have been independents elected to state offices, local offices, and federal offices. Bernie's one of them. Right, so there is a possibility. It's just incredibly hard. But you're not getting into politics because it's easy, because politics is not easy. If you think running as a Democrat is going to be easy to run as an independent, quit, because it's not going to be easy either way. Just quit and go into something else, take up fishing or something like that. But don't get into politics if you're going to, think it's easy. And we're at our point in history, it's not easy, because we have to make a decision that we're going to either run as a Democrat and get compromised, which I think is happening. I don't think we could try. If they break through, I'll be very happy. But if they don't, we have to have an alternative plan. And also, like I said before, set up that infrastructure that you need. Learn on how campaigns are ran. It's very difficult as an independent to find people who could do these functions like treasurer and campaign managers who are not already party hacks. That is the most difficult thing. And independents have to really understand who they're working with and understand that if they get attacked, they have to have a counterattack or not attack at all. But you have to be able to overcome certain obstacles. What's great about now is that we have a lot of progressive organizations that are trying to make a third party, trying to make a coalition, so we can overcome these burdens of not being taken seriously. And I think part of it is that whenever in the past that we've had a third party come out, that there's no real foreign policy. For instance, whenever a third party candidate comes out, right, and we're in the middle of some incursion or something like with Syria, but in the past maybe we had something with Libya, we don't address why these things are wrong. Like why removing a leader of a country could be disastrous for the rest of the world and our country. We're not able to address terrorism and how to get rid of it other than the military option. We have to be able to answer these things. It doesn't matter what level of government you're running for. If you're running for dog catcher, you should be able to answer foreign policy as far as I'm concerned. So we have to really hang together. I want to support independent candidates. I want to figure out, I'm trying to figure that out right now. We really need some way of saying, you're running for office in Detroit, Michigan? All right, let's get someone that's good at being a campaign strategist in your area. If there's no one, we'll try to train someone to help you so you have someone there with you helping you out instead of leaving you out to dry. And it wasn't done on purpose. It's not on purpose. It's that we're building something now because the Democratic Party has basically sold us out.
You brought up foreign policy. The last thing I want to talk about is, Nina Turner had a great example of this problem. Progressives are facing. She said on Sunday on CNN State of the Union that Democrats and progressives have to address issues beyond just Russia. Just my question is, how do you think progressives should really not only try to refocus people on the issues, because the mainstream media is driving this Russian narrative as hard as they can, and it's not going to stop. I think it's going to continue all the way through 2018, and at the same time, I think it turns off a lot of people from politics and helps foster this anti-political environment because there's nothing visceral for voters to really engage with. But in others, I think a lot of people are getting lost in this Russian hysteria, are really clasping onto this neo-McCarthyism. So how would you recommend pulling some of those people back into reality and trying to get them back into focus on what's really important?
Well, she was very right, and I was very glad to see Nina come out and talk about it because the United States, since the beginning, foreign policy always informed our domestic policy, and domestic policy always informed our foreign policy. And so we had this we call it intermestic issues, which it basically brings our foreign policy or domestic policy together. So how do we properly connect the American people to what's going on abroad and not bringing this hysteria? First, when it comes to Russia, really, progressives, we have no control over that case. Whatever it is, we have to focus on our elections, getting into office, having our own direction. And so what the mainstream media has been doing is just turning a lot of people off, like you said, and basically flipping people over in themselves. The way that we help the American people is that we talk about how we're going to fix our infrastructure, how we're going to build jobs, how we're going to make our country a 21st century nation and bring about peace abroad. And the best way to do that is explain on a local level. You can go to your local legislature, your local council could basically pass a resolution on how they don't agree with regime change, how they don't agree with all the wars that we're in. Because honestly, we have our friends and family who are in the military. We have to care about them too. They're out there. They're doing what they their duty, and they're coming back to a VA that's really just, they really don't enjoy going to get health care, because when they come back, they're not really taken care of. And that's something that we've been dealing with since Walter Reed back in the early 2000s. We dealt with veterans not getting the care that they needed. These are things that we need to address, because there's people out there with families who are in the military, and we want to make sure that our policies are good, not only for the people, but for people in men and women in uniform. So we know that, hey, you know what? We want to have more diplomacy in this area of the world. And really, let me say one thing about Russia, because really I watch about it, but I don't think that it's something that we can control. So Russia and us go way back to when the Tsarist Russia. So there was a lot of crossover with us in the early 20th century. There was a lot of crossover between a new nation, America, and Russia. And we've had this long sort of like off and on relationship, to the point where we fast forward and we have a space relationship with them. We send our astronauts up into space on their rocket ships. So it's not like Russia and us. We do not, as Americans, we have a very complicated relationship with them. But if there is a chance that they interfered in our elections, it's our fault. Our elections, our states are very disorganized. Our machines here in New Jersey, there's no paper trail in New Jersey. Whose fault is that? Is that Russia's fault that we can't have fair elections? Is it Russia's fault that we have like parties that are trying to screw over progressive candidates? Is it Russia's fault that we're so disorganized across the country when it comes to our elections? We have to really look in on ourselves, because there's no reason on a foreign policy level to say, Russia, you interfered in our elections, when we know that we could improve our electoral process. So if we bring home to the American people that, look, we want to answer your issues. We want to make sure that we're all collectively, we want to make sure that we have a health care for all, because I believe the health care is a right. That is something that we could work on together. The way that we do that, we could do it either by pieces, so health care, we could go to, all the other issues that progressives care about, and have peace abroad and try to bring that about. Or we could do it all in one shot, a new deal where we have a huge proposal and we say we want to really rebuild our infrastructure here as a country, and not cause trouble abroad, which Trump, he doesn't really know what he's doing. He's all over the place. That's a problem, right? But to rail on about Russia with no substance is really negating the history of foreign policy in America. And I really want the American people to understand. So whenever we're out there, we're educating them. We say, go to your local council, speak about what concerns you, and then we go from there. Because the saying in Washington is politics is local. So we need an educated population in our country to make informed votes in the future.
And John, is there anything else you'd like our viewers to know, or anything else you'd like to talk about before I let you go?
No problem. So thanks for having me on, Mike. This is a great conversation that we're having, and you're doing a lot of great work. Like I said before, I just want the viewers to know that you're breaking a lot of stories that are important to us, and the American people should know all the information out there so they can make informed decisions. But this is what I'm saying, that we have organizations, progressive organizations, that are ready to take up the mantle so progressives could have a place to go when they leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, I've worked with them. Like I said before, they're a mess right now. And we have the Republicans who have taken over, they've had the House, taken over the Senate and the presidency. And now we have a majority Republican on the Supreme Court. So obviously we're in the pickle, because the Democrats have chosen to not support progressives. And let's just be real about that. When the establishment comes and they're like, well, you know what, there's all these other issues, it's Russia and all this, it's a distortion. The Democratic Party is a failed institution because they will not change. And so what do? When we actually establish our People's Party, we're going to need to learn how to get on the ballot. We're going to have the people on the ground to get to the people to have us supported. We're going to have the policies in place so our candidates are out there saying, this is how we're going to change the country. This is how we're going to make sure that we have peace abroad. these are the things that we're going to implement to make sure that children have a future here in America. And the substance behind that is very important. Be very wary of people who, like you say, like, oh yeah, you know what? Whoever like tries to work for progressive policies are fools. I've heard that before. You know, oh, why are you working on these policies? I'll tell you why we're working on these policies. I'll tell you right now why we're working on these policies. Because democratic foreign policy and democratic economic policy is rubbish. It has been tried. They can't win elections against the Republicans. People are voting against them in favor of Republicans because they're sick of being taught down to. So we have to be able to come up with something that's true so we can push forward, because the Democrats have lost the grip. And so we have to build everything the way that we have to as independents. And my advice to everyone is to keep doing what you're doing. You know, I'm here. You know, Mike's here. We're all here to work together. And at the end of the day, we have to have a plan to win elections and get our agenda across. And without having some form of solidarity, without having some form of togetherness, and without having some form of intellectual might to formulate these policies, we're just going to be running back to the Democrats over and over again and getting screwed over. And the world is going to keep deteriorating. And why even, you know, think of that? So stay positive, stay innovative, stay revolutionary. Don't let anyone scare you into running into the Democrats. You know, this is do it ourselves and get the job done.
All right. Well, Jon, you know, thanks again for coming on. I think you gave a lot of you know, really great advice, because yeah, I can report on these issues, but there's always that question you have to ask, and you have to talk to activists on how to you know, channel, you know, what's going on into figuring out what to do about it. So you know, I'm working to try to figure that out, and so are you. And so is, you know, obviously everybody watching you know, is trying to do that. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on and you know, discuss how we move forward from here. So Jon, is there anything you want to plug before we go?
Yeah, so I'm going to have a show on Real Progressive that's going to be focused on foreign policy, and also like you know, criticizing and really being critical on neoliberal policies, because I believe a modern monetary theory and this revolutionary economics that we're trying to push out there, really, it's the Congress has the power, and we have the power to push out a new agenda. But also we could do it abroad. We could try to help countries become more independent, you know, and our policies that we've been pushing for the past 50 years, the whole Bretton Woods setup is not working. So, and we're also going to be talking about, you know, ways that we could, you know, try to turn the world in another direction. Because right now, the direction that we're going in with the vacuums in Iraq and what's going on in Syria, and what's going on in North Korea. Let me say something really small about North Korea. So we have to understand, in order to fix North Korea, we have to understand our relationship with China, and the relationship between China and North Korea, and our history with Japan and in that region since the beginning of the 20th century. That is the depth of the issues that we're going to get into, because if we don't understand the history, there's no way we can fix the future. And so that's a show I'm going to be coming out with. It's going to be called MMT International, and I'm going to be pushing it out pretty soon.
All right, so you know, thanks for that, Jon. Everyone, you know, keep an eye out for that on the Real Progressives page. You know, I don't know if I guess that. You know, and tomorrow, I'm not sure when it's airing, but I'll be. So keep an eye out for that as well. Jon, you know, thanks again. It was a pleasure having you on. I hope to do it again sometime soon.
Definitely, man. We'll do it again. Thanks for having me on.
All right.